There comes a moment when silence says more than words, when desire fades into stillness, and you begin to hear a deeper rhythm, a pulse beneath the noise. That is not your hunger, but your soul remembering its strength. We live in a world that glorifies pursuit, to chase, to touch, to consume, but rarely are we taught to pause. And yet, in that pause, something ancient awakens. Not the fear of missing out, but the freedom of tuning in. The practice of abstinence is not about denial. It is about rediscovery, the art of letting the body grow quiet so the soul can finally speak. When people hear the word abstinence, their minds often leap to what is forbidden, to deprivation, to loss, to the cold edge of self-denial. But to those who walk the inner path, abstinence is not a desert. It is a garden. It is not emptiness, and it is redirection. Every ounce of energy once scattered outward, toward pleasure, approval, or escape, begins to flow inward again. The river that once overflowed its banks now becomes a current of power. The noise quiets, the storm calms, and the silent voice within begins to rise. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Abstinence is how we meet the unconscious face to face. It strips away distractions until all that remains is the raw encounter with ourselves, our impulses, our fears, our hidden motives. Most people never reach this point because it is uncomfortable to be alone with what lives beneath the surface. But when you stay, when you listen, that discomfort becomes your teacher. In Eastern philosophy, energy is not lost, it is transformed. The body, mind, and spirit are not separate entities, but one living system of flow. When we abstain not from shame, but from wisdom, we begin to accumulate life energy, chi, prana, jing, subtle forces that build the foundation of vitality and awareness. This energy, when not leaked through impulsivity or constant stimulation, consolidates within. And where does it go? It strengthens your awareness. It sharpens your clarity. It fortifies your presence. Imagine a river without boundaries, always flooding, wild, directionless. That is how most people live, chasing stimulation, drowning in excess, unable to rest. But when that same river is guided by a channel, it gains purpose. It gains force. It can turn turbines. It can create power. So it is with desire. When you direct it, it becomes willpower. When you restrain it wisely, it becomes presence. There was once a man in his 50s who had spent his entire life chasing relationships, 3 marriages, countless flings, endless heartbreaks. He told me he had forgotten what stillness felt like. "I only know how to chase," he said. And then, in a moment of exhaustion, he stopped. He chose 1 year of complete abstinence. No dating, no intimacy, no seeking. The silence at first was unbearable. He said it felt like turning off the music in a room where he'd been dancing blindly for decades. But with each passing day, the noise faded, and something else began to emerge. He could hear his own breath. He could feel his feet on the ground. He could sense thoughts not driven by craving, but by truth. At the end of that year, he told me something simple yet profound. "Now I can love from fullness, not hunger." That is the transformation abstinence brings. Not deprivation, but direction. Not silence as punishment, but silence as purification. Neuroscience now echoes this wisdom. When you repeatedly act on every impulse, your brain's reward system becomes overstimulated, flooded with dopamine. The pleasure center becomes addicted to novelty, to the next hit, the next validation. But when you abstain, and not forever, but for long enough to reset, your brain begins to rewire. It restores sensitivity. It rebalances chemistry. This is neuroplasticity, the brain's quiet miracle. And through it, abstinence becomes not just spiritual discipline, but neurological repair. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He was right. When we abstain, the pain we once escaped must be faced. The loneliness, the restlessness, the need for validation all rise to the surface. But beneath that discomfort lies renewal. Every craving that you do not obey becomes reclaimed energy. Every emotion you observe instead of acting upon becomes strength. A woman once told me her story after a long relationship ended. She chose 6 months of emotional abstinence. No dating, no texting, no replaying what could have been. At first, she said, it felt like withdrawal, like losing a limb. But slowly, she realized that what she had been addicted to wasn't love. It was distraction. Distraction from her own silence, her own unmet needs, her own creativity. In that stillness, she began to rediscover herself. Her laughter returned. Her art returned. Her soul returned. She said, "I thought I had lost myself in love, but truthfully I had never fully met myself until now." Carl Jung once remarked, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Abstinence is that awakening. The turning of attention from the outer noise toward the inner world. It is how the soul remembers that it does not need to chase what it already contains. Modern psychology calls this interoception, the awareness of your own inner landscape. When you practice abstinence, this awareness heightens. You begin to feel your heartbeat, your breath, your subtle energy. You sense emotions before they explode. You notice anxiety before it spirals. You respond instead of react. And with that sensitivity comes power. Not the power to control others, but the power to master yourself. This is not suppression. It is refinement. It is choosing to channel your fire instead of burning in it. As the ancient masters said, when the breath is steady, the mind becomes clear. Abstinence is that steadying breath. It is the quiet cultivation of inner balance in a world addicted to noise. When the body grows silent, the soul begins to speak, not through words, but through knowing. And that knowing says, "You are already whole. You do not need to be needed to feel valuable. You do not need to chase love to prove your worth." Because the deepest connection begins not when two bodies touch, but when two souls meet, each one already full, already grounded, already home within themselves. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And abstinence in its highest form is that privilege, the sacred pause that allows you to meet yourself before you meet another. When the body goes quiet, the mind begins to reveal what has always been there but never seen. Abstinence, in its truest form, is not about restraint for its own sake. It is about learning how to see again, to see yourself without the distortions of craving, and to see others without the fog of projection. Most people mistake constant activity for life. They confuse motion with meaning. But the soul does not move fast. It moves deeply. And when you stop long enough to listen, it begins to speak in whispers. You begin to hear the difference between hunger and truth, between desire and direction. You start to notice how many of your impulses were never truly yours, but echoes of the world, advertising, loneliness, inherited patterns of approval. The silence of abstinence becomes a mirror, showing you what belongs to you and what does not. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And that is the secret reason why silence feels unbearable at first. It forces you to confront what you've avoided, the unfinished feelings, the emptiness behind the distractions, the questions without easy answers. But if you stay with it, if you endure the stillness long enough, the silence turns from an enemy into a guide. In Eastern medicine, it is said that the kidneys hold the essence of life, the root of willpower and vitality. Excessive indulgence drains this essence, scattering your inner reserves. But through conscious abstinence, through breath, discipline, stillness, that essence begins to replenish. Your body becomes calm. Your spirit becomes anchored. Your will becomes unshakable. This replenishment is not mystical. It is physiological. When you abstain from constant stimulation, whether sexual, emotional, or digital, your nervous system begins to regulate. The cortisol drops. The dopamine stabilizes. The body shifts from survival mode into restoration. This is why, after a period of abstinence, clarity arises naturally. It is not forced meditation. It is biological harmony returning to its natural state. In this state, presence is born. Presence is not something you learn from books. It is what remains when noise falls away. It is the gentle strength of someone who does not chase the next moment, because they are fully in this one. Their eyes are calm. Their breath is slow. They no longer radiate hunger. They radiate wholeness. You can feel it when someone has cultivated this stillness. Their presence soothes you even in silence. Their energy feels clean, steady, trustworthy. You find yourself relaxing around them without knowing why. This is not charisma. It is coherence. Their nervous system is regulated and yours begins to mirror it. Presence cannot be faked. It must be forged, and abstinence is the forge. It teaches you to sit in the fire of your impulses without acting on them. It teaches you to breathe through discomfort until you realize you are stronger than it. It transforms desire from chaos into current. There's a story told in the Taoist tradition of a disciple whose heart was consumed by infatuation. He could not focus on his studies. His thoughts were always on a woman from the village. One day, his master led him to a still pond and said, "Look into the water." "What do you see?" "My reflection," the boy replied. The master dropped a stone into the pond. "Now what do you see?" "Nothing," said the disciple. "Only ripples." The master smiled. "That is your mind when filled with desire, disturbed, unclear. Wait." They waited. Slowly the ripples faded. The water stilled. "Now," the master said, "look again." "My reflection returns," whispered the boy. The master nodded. Abstinence is not about rejecting desire. It is about waiting until your mind is still enough to see yourself clearly. How many of us have mistaken ripples for reflection? How often have we looked into the chaos of our emotions and called it truth? This is why abstinence matters. It stills the surface so we can finally see what lies beneath. In relationships, this clarity is everything. When you are calm within, you no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. You no longer confuse attention for affection. You no longer seek someone to complete you because you have already found your center. When two people meet from this place of wholeness, something sacred happens. Their bond is no longer built on dependency but on resonance. They are not trying to fill each other's emptiness. They are meeting as two full beings, sharing overflow instead of need. That is the soil where real love grows. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." True connection transforms. It expands both souls rather than depleting them. But transformation can only happen when both partners are present, not projecting ghosts of their unmet needs. This kind of connection requires purification, and purification requires space. That is what abstinence gives. The sacred pause between one chapter and the next. It is the reset that allows your energy to clear before you intertwine it with another's. There was a therapist who once guided a couple on the edge of divorce. They had spent years arguing, fixing, analyzing, yet nothing changed. One day she asked them to sit facing each other in silence for 5 minutes. No words, no solutions, just presence. At first they resisted. It felt awkward, foreign, but slowly their bodies relaxed. The air softened. Tears formed. The wife whispered, This is what I've been missing." "Not your words, you." That moment revealed a truth more powerful than any argument. Connection begins where presence begins, and presence begins where noise ends. So when you find yourself restless, wanting to fill the silence with talking, touching, scrolling, pause. Remember, silence is not absence. It is presence intensified. Abstinence, practiced with awareness, does not make you distant from life. It draws you closer to it, not because now you can feel again. You can sense again. You can listen again. It is not the rejection of desire, but the refinement of it. It turns chaos into current, emotion into energy, and loneliness into light. And somewhere within that stillness, the soul begins to whisper, "You were never lacking. You were simply distracted. Come home." Every emotion you resist acting on becomes a seed of strength. This is the hidden power of abstinence. It is not coldness, it is containment, the decision to hold energy within until it transforms into wisdom. Just as muscles are strengthened by resistance, the emotional body is fortified by restraint. Every time you choose not to lash out, not to chase, not to escape discomfort through pleasure, you build what can only be called emotional musculature. We live in an age that glorifies expression. You say what you feel. Do what you want. Follow your desires. But freedom is not doing everything you feel. Freedom is having the awareness to choose what aligns with your truth. Emotional freedom is not the absence of discipline. It is the mastery of direction. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Abstinence does exactly this. It confronts the darkness we hide behind constant motion. It forces us to see the unhealed parts of ourselves that crave comfort instead of clarity. In silence, our desires stop being distractions and start becoming teachers. A young woman once shared her story of heartbreak. She had been ghosted by someone she deeply cared for. Her first impulse was to reach out, to text, to call, to demand answers. But something within her paused. She remembered a line from her meditation teacher. "Do not move until the water clears." So she waited. She sat with her pain instead of reacting to it. She cried. She breathed. She watched. Days passed. The fire of emotion that once burned her began to soften into light. She realized she did not want him back. She wanted her peace back. That choice not to act on impulse was her initiation into emotional maturity. It was her first taste of real power. Not the power over another, but power over herself. When we choose not to act from our wound, we teach the nervous system something revolutionary. That intensity is not danger. That emotion does not require immediate escape. We create a new pattern in the brain. The space between stimulus and response widens. Neuroscience calls this strengthening the prefrontal cortex, the seat of wisdom and foresight. Ancient mystics called it the alchemy of transmutation. There's a saying from a Zen monk: every time you feel the fire rise within you, do not throw it at another. Let it burn inward and illuminate your clarity. That is the essence of abstinence. It does not extinguish your fire. It refines it. It turns reactivity into radiant understanding. And that radiance becomes presence, the kind of calm strength that others instinctively trust. When you cultivate this inner stillness, you stop needing to prove anything. Your words soften. Your eyes slow down. You become the kind of person whose energy says more than their voice ever could. In relationships, this is everything. Because love without discipline quickly becomes attachment. And attachment without awareness becomes dependence. But when you have trained your emotional muscles, when you have learned to pause and breathe, you bring something sacred into love, choice. You no longer love because you need someone to soothe your pain. You love because you are overflowing with presence. You choose not out of fear of being alone, but out of reverence for shared wholeness. True intimacy begins here. It is not a storm that consumes you. It is a flame that endures. It is devotion, not desperation. Yet the path of abstinence is not easy. It will test you. It will bring your shadows to the surface. Old patterns will call your name. The late-night distractions, the nostalgia, the need to be seen. But this time you will recognize them not as invitations, but as tests. Each time you choose silence over reaction, reflection over indulgence, you strengthen your spirit. In psychology, this is known as emotional regulation. In spirituality, it is known as self-mastery. In both, it is the same truth. Power without control is chaos. Love without clarity is illusion. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no energy without opposition. Your restraint is that sacred opposition. It creates friction, and friction creates growth. Without it, energy leaks into endless distraction. With it, energy condenses into presence, and presence becomes influence. People who carry this inner coherence draw others naturally. Their calmness feels like a harbor. Their silence feels like gravity. They don't manipulate. They magnetize. And this magnetism is born not from strategy, but from substance. This is why abstinence is never sterile. It is fertile. Every emotion you hold with awareness becomes compost for new strength. Every craving you observe instead of feeding becomes a prayer for clarity. This is how you turn pain into purpose, loneliness into luminosity, desire into devotion. Jung once said, "When you can hold the storm without becoming the storm, you have learned the meaning of peace." Abstinence teaches that art, the art of being still in the center of chaos. Because life will always bring movement, temptation, noise. But stillness is not about removing the storm. It is about remembering who you are within it. In the stillness that abstinence brings, something extraordinary happens. The soul begins to expand beyond the limits of the body. You start to feel energy differently, not as hunger, but as harmony. You begin to sense what is genuine and what is false. You can feel when words don't match energy, when smiles hide pain, when affection carries an agenda. Your awareness sharpens not as suspicion but as wisdom. This is sensitivity elevated to intelligence, and it allows you to walk through life with grace, unshaken by praise or rejection, steady through both attention and absence. You stop chasing what you can now attract effortlessly: peace, truth, connection. So when the urge to reach, to react, to run arises again, pause, breathe. Remember that your stillness is not weakness. It is signal. It is how your soul speaks to the world without noise. Abstinence, when understood, is not about self-denial. It is about self-definition. It is the furnace where impulse becomes insight, and emotion becomes energy that heals instead of harms. Because ultimately the goal is not to suppress desire, but to elevate it, to transform instinct into intuition, attraction into alignment, and silence into sacred presence. When you reach this point, you realize something profound. You were never meant to escape your passions. You were meant to master them. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no energy without opposition. Your restraint is that sacred opposition. It creates friction, and friction creates growth. Without it, energy leaks into endless distraction. With it, energy condenses into presence, and presence becomes influence. People who carry this inner coherence draw others naturally. Their calmness feels like a harbor. Their silence feels like gravity. They don't manipulate, they magnetize. And this magnetism is born not from strategy, but from substance. This is why abstinence is never sterile. It is fertile. Every emotion you hold with awareness becomes compost for new strength. Every craving you observe instead of feeding becomes a prayer for clarity. This is how you turn pain into purpose, loneliness into luminosity, desire into devotion. Jung once said, "When you can hold the storm without becoming the storm, you have learned the meaning of peace." Abstinence teaches that art, the art of being still in the center of chaos. Because life will always bring movement, temptation, noise. But stillness is not about removing the storm. It is about remembering who you are within it. In the stillness that abstinence brings, something extraordinary happens. The soul begins to expand beyond the limits of the body. You start to feel energy differently. Not as hunger, but as harmony. You begin to sense what is genuine and what is false. You can feel when words don't match energy, when smiles hide pain, when affection carries an agenda. Your awareness sharpens not as suspicion but as wisdom. This is sensitivity elevated to intelligence, and it allows you to walk through life with grace, unshaken by praise or rejection, steady through both attention and absence. You stop chasing what you can now attract effortlessly: peace, truth, connection. So when the urge to reach, to react, to run arises again, pause, breathe. Remember that your stillness is not weakness. It is signal. It is how your soul speaks to the world without noise. Abstinence, when understood, is not about self-denial. It is about self-definition. It is the furnace where impulse becomes insight, and emotion becomes energy that heals instead of harms. Because ultimately the goal is not to suppress desire, but to elevate it, to transform instinct into intuition, attraction into alignment, and silence into sacred presence. When you reach this point, you realize something profound. You were never meant to escape your passions. You were meant to master them. When the body grows still and the emotions settle, what remains is awareness, clean, quiet, and awake. Abstinence has brought you here, not as punishment, but as preparation. Now in that vast inner space, a new understanding begins to dawn. Intention. Intention is the compass of the soul. It is the quiet direction beneath every action, the invisible current guiding what kind of energy you bring into the world. Without intention, even love becomes confusion. With it, every connection becomes sacred. Most people enter relationships not from clarity but from craving. They seek warmth when what they need is healing. They seek validation when what they need is self-acceptance. They mistake attraction for alignment and chemistry for compatibility. But when you have walked through abstinence, when you have met yourself in silence, you begin to see differently. You no longer ask, "Will they choose me?" You ask, "Does this connection bring both of us closer to truth?" Sacred intention means choosing not just who you share your energy with, but why. It means asking, is my desire rooted in truth or trauma? Is my attraction a reflection of my highest values or a repetition of my oldest wounds? Abstinence gives you the distance to ask these questions without distortion. It clears the emotional smoke that once made illusion look like love. A woman once told me that after years of failed relationships, she decided to practice celibacy. Not because she was bitter, but because she finally wanted to see clearly. I needed to hear my own thoughts, she said, without someone else's voice echoing in my mind. At first, loneliness visited her often, but slowly she realized she was not lonely. She was simply unaccustomed to peace. She began to feel her own rhythm again, and when love returned, it came quietly, respectfully, without urgency. Because she was no longer chasing, she was choosing. This is the essence of sacred intention, moving from instinct to discernment. Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. To awaken is to love consciously. It is to understand that every connection is an exchange of energy, every word a vibration, every touch an agreement between souls. When you realize this, you begin to approach intimacy with reverence. You no longer rush into it blindly. You wait until both energies align, until the connection nourishes rather than drains. Abstinence teaches this patience. It slows the rhythm of the nervous system until you can feel truth again. And truth has a feeling, steady, grounded, calm. It never demands, it never rushes, it never disguises itself as chaos. In Chinese philosophy, there is a concept called Jing, the essence of vitality. This essence is not only physical but energetic. When scattered through excess, it weakens the spirit. When cultivated through stillness, it strengthens the presence. Those who conserve their Jing do not lose magnetism. They amplify it. They radiate a quiet confidence that cannot be manufactured. Because it is not performance. It is power anchored in peace. When you embody this energy, you stop chasing people. You attract resonance. You stop searching for validation. You become validation itself. People feel your steadiness and instinctively trust it, even if they can't explain why. That is the unspoken power of abstinence. It restores your energetic integrity. But sacred intention does not only apply to romance. It shapes how you speak, how you listen, how you show up in every connection. A master once said, "Enter each interaction with three things: attention, respect, and emptiness." Attention, to truly see. Respect, to honor another's humanity. Emptiness, to leave space for the present moment to reveal itself. What would life look like if we entered every moment that way? Every conversation, every meeting, every act of love. We would stop performing and start perceiving. We would stop needing and start noticing. This is what abstinence prepares us for. The ability to experience life without the interference of our unconscious hunger. Because real connection requires space. It cannot breathe in the suffocation of constant wanting. Abstinence clears that space. It empties the cup. And into that emptiness, something divine flows. Understanding. When you are no longer ruled by impulse, you can finally hear what your soul is saying. It tells you that you are not here to chase love. You are here to become it. You are not here to grasp for peace. You are here to embody it. You are not here to fill emptiness. You are here to realize you were never empty at all. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That is the final initiation of abstinence, self-acceptance without condition. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming present. To sit with your imperfections without judgment. To feel your emotions without fear. To be alone without loneliness. Because from that acceptance, true relationship can grow. One based not on need, but on truth. And when love comes again, as it always does, it will not be frantic or forced. It will arrive like dawn, slow and certain. It will not ask you to shrink, to chase, to prove. It will recognize your stillness and rise to meet it. For two souls at peace do not collide, they converge. Abstinence is not the rejection of desire. It is the sanctification of it. It is how you polish the mirror of your being, until love can see its own reflection in you. It is how you prepare the temple of your body for the presence of something higher. Awareness, intention, devotion. So when you choose silence, do not do it from fear. Do it from reverence. Reverence for your energy. Reverence for your evolution. Reverence for the quality of love you are now willing to receive. Because abstinence is not absence, it is alignment. Not suppression but selection. Not coldness but clarity. It is how you return to yourself after the noise has faded. After the illusions have fallen. After you realize that peace is not found in another's arms, but in your own breath. And when you stand there whole and awake, you finally understand. Abstinence was never about what you gave up. It was about what you reclaimed. Your attention. Your clarity. Your sacred intention. And from that place, when you love as the soul intended, not as a seeker, but as a source.